Well, y'all, thank you very much for coming. Another beautiful South Carolina day to our beautiful South Carolina State House. We are going to continue with the progress that we began. It was interrupted somewhat when the pandemic hit last year. We are going to continue to press for prosperity in our state. We are going to continue to invest in early childhood education and affordability and accessibility in higher ed for the people of our state in order to build, train, and educate the workforce necessary to compete for jobs and future investment in our state in the future. As you know, we've had just in the last 3 years I think it's over $10 billion worth of new investment that brought with them 35,000 just with those investments, 35,000 or so new jobs in addition to the regular job growth that we're having. But we have to continue. South Carolina has to be known as a place where education is of utmost importance, and we are going to continue to do that. Last year, we were poised to take bold steps in education reform, including a record investment in early childhood education to empower the next generation's workforce and prosperity. Then, as you recall, COVID-19 came and those plans were put on hold, but they were not forgotten. South Carolina's $1.8 billion revenue surplus projections evaporated almost overnight. You know that many states immediately shuttered their economies, closed their businesses, enacted all sorts of very strict draconian restrictions, but we in South Carolina took a different and better approach. We never closed. We slowed down, but we never closed. Our reasonable steps of limited, measured, and temporary actions allowed us to combat the virus without crippling our economy. And now we're coming back. By freezing new spending and holding state governments steady at the previous year's spending levels, we had no new budget, as you recall. We've been able to avoid cutting services, raising taxes, or borrowing money in South Carolina, which they are doing in other states all over the country. Today, South Carolina is in a stronger financial position than virtually every other state in the country. And that is because we were thinking ahead, we were being smart, we were being careful, we were being cautious, and now we must continue to think ahead. My executive budget places $400 million of what we expect, the new money coming in, that's about 38 cents of every dollar, into our state's rainy day reserve fund. Why? Because we must be prepared for any future economic uncertainties should they occur. The pandemic is still here. We don't know what is going to happen. We know we're making great steps, but we cannot see the future clearly, and we must be careful as we have been in the past. The Savannah River site, we're setting aside the $525 million that the state recently received in the lawsuit with the Savannah River site settlement with the federal government. These funds should be handled not in this budget, but in a standalone bill which will allow for thoughtful consideration and appropriate public scrutiny. That's $525 million there. Our small businesses in South Carolina have borne the brunt of the financial impact of the pandemic, especially those in the hospitality and service industries. In the parts of our state where those industries are the most numerous is where we've had many dislocations. To date, the state has directed over $40 million in CARES Act funds to 2,284 small businesses in our state. Unfortunately, the request we received exceeded the CARES Act funds, so we have to do more. You'll recall those were the funds that we went around the state to announce to be sure that people knew they were there so they could apply, and they did in big numbers. My budget directs an additional $123 million, that's over the $40 million earlier, $123 million for additional small business grants, and these will be administered by the Department of Commerce. Prosperity requires that we continue to make bold investments. The next generation's workforce must possess the education and skills necessary for South Carolina to compete for jobs and capital in the world's market. We are on the world map. Businesses, investors must know where we are, and they must know that this is the place to invest. That means we have to have open classrooms. We have to have our classrooms open, and they have to be strong. School districts in our state have received over $1.2 billion in COVID-19 relief from the federal government. Along with state funds, school districts have been provided the resources necessary to operate full-time and teach in person 5 days a week, which includes, and we still have ample supplies of protective equipment. Once again, I'm proposing that we invest $48 million to expand access to full-day kindergarten for every lower-income 4-year-old child in the state. This expansion will allow parents to choose the public, private, or for-profit child care provider that best suits their child's needs. I'm also proposing an appropriation of $35 million to maintain the state's financial commitment to funding our classrooms, keeping them open, keeping them going, keeping them clean. This will also allow school districts to resume all scheduled step salary increases for our teachers, which were suspended with the pandemic. Law enforcement. My executive budget provides funding to place a certified law enforcement school resource officer in every school, in every county, all day, every day. In addition, this budget provides the necessary funding to place a school nurse in every school in the state, and it provides every school with access to a mental health counselor who may not be there all day, but they have access to a mental health counselor. That's about $29 million. After months of interrupted or virtual instruction, isolation, and disruption of normal routines, these resources are certainly necessary, and they will certainly be of great relief and comfort to the parents who want their children in those schools. Our public charter schools have seen, as a result of the pandemic, a 25% increase in 2020 student enrollment because of working parents' strong desire for 5-day in-person classroom instruction for their children. Accordingly, my executive budget sends $25 million to follow the students to their new schools. This budget also replaces the Common Core school books, the textbooks that are used in our classrooms, and they'll be replaced with new textbooks to be purchased by the Department of Education. This should have been accomplished long ago. We will accomplish it this time. And we are dedicating $30 million to continue expanding broadband in South Carolina through public and private match investments. We all agree and have learned in vivid description the necessity for having broadband all over our state, and especially in the rural areas where it has been absent so far. We must continue making our colleges, universities, and technical colleges accessible and affordable, as I mentioned earlier, to the sons and daughters of South Carolina. Therefore, this budget provides $60 million so that every South Carolinian who qualifies for a federal needs-based financial aid, as measured by the Pell Grants, the federal Pell Grants, has additional state financial assistance to attend any in-state public college, university, or technical college. And students at private, independent, and historically black colleges and universities will receive an additional $20 million for tuition grants and assistance. Also, we're providing an additional $60 million for high-demand job skills training. This includes such programs as Ready SC, direct training for prospective manufacturers, and workforce scholarships and grants to South Carolinians to receive skill-based certificates and accreditations at our state's technical colleges. Our state's technical college system is the best in the United States, and we intend to make it even better. Also, active duty members of the South Carolina National Guard, whether Army or Air, while attending college in our state, will have 100% of their college tuition paid by the state under my budget. The military is very important to South Carolina. We have a strong military history. This will make us stronger. The state maintenance liability on many aging state-owned buildings and infrastructure at the colleges, universities, and technical colleges has been ignored and must be addressed now. This budget provides $176 million to be distributed how? Pro rata, based on each tuition's fall 2020 in-state enrollment. This way, the state doesn't need to take on debt in the future through a massive bond bill. To keep South Carolinians safe, we must maintain a robust law enforcement presence and properly fund our police. I believe we have the finest police officers in the United States, the finest law enforcement establishment. Our state law enforcement agencies, however, continue to lose valuable and experienced personnel because they are unable to remain competitive with pay and benefits in other parts of our economy. This budget therefore dedicates over $13 million new dollars to law enforcement, public safety, and first response agencies for recruitment and retention. And that, of course, includes raises for troopers, state law enforcement division agents, wildlife officers, probation agents, and corrections officers. And speaking of corrections, this budget has money, authorizes the Department of Corrections to utilize up to $100 million in federal CARES Act funds the agency will receive to make our prisons safer and more secure, both inside and outside of the fence. In addition, I asked the General Assembly to eliminate all state income taxes on the retirement pay of career military veterans and first responders, as well as retired state and federal law enforcement officers, firefighters, and peace officers. I asked before, I ask again. The conditions of many of our National Guard armories are unsafe, unstable, or inadequate for training as well as for routine drills, and this budget will provide for a timely and significant investment into improving the condition of our armories around the state. Finally, the General Assembly must end the practice of appropriating to agencies unrequested, undisclosed pork barrel earmarks in the budget that are shielded from public view, debate, and scrutiny. There is a better way. If the projects are good projects, they should stand on their merits and not be hidden from public discernment. There's a better way. This budget recommends that way, and that is a public competitive grants process, which will allow for the public scrutiny and total transparency. The money will go to the agency, and the agency will have hearings and receive applications for the use of the money, and it will all be transparent. So finally, in closing, I want to say that the people of South Carolina have demonstrated a lot of strength, remarkable resilience and stamina and courage, and together we have made it through one of the hardest years of our history. We have seen, we can compare what we have done here with what they've done in other places, and I can say that I am proud of our people. As we emerge from this pandemic, the competition for economic prosperity will arise again. It will be between people, between states, even between nations, and it is pent up, and it will be even more vigorous and ferocious than ever. So we have to remain smart, and we have to remain resolute, and we have to get to work. But we need to continue what we've done before, and that is working together. If we do that, I am confident that we in South Carolina, our state, will grow stronger and more prosperous than ever before. I believe in the people of South Carolina. I believe in America. I believe that we are in the best place in the whole world to live, work, and raise a family, and I am confident that the best is yet to come. Does anyone have any questions? Ms. Adcox.
So on the small business grants, the 123 million, the applications that businesses, the ones from last fall, it almost is double that was what they had to reject. So
That's right.
to arrive at 123 million, is that enough?
Well, we don't know if, we hope that will be enough. We're basing it on a lot of things. We don't have an unlimited amount of money, but based on the response we got earlier, it was sharp, it was quick, it was overwhelming. Well, we know this will go it's a lot more money than we had before. We hope that this will do it. Yes, sir.
On those grants, the ones earlier from last year were through the Department of Administration. Why are we doing it through the Department of Commerce? Or why would you like to do it through the Department of Commerce this time?
We think Commerce is the right place for it. The Department of Administration is loaded with work, and we believe the Department of Commerce is set up. They've handled other things equally well, and we believe that'll be the place to do it this time. No. The delay was caused by the overwhelming demand. I mean, it was a great response. We were delighted that people realized that those funds were available, and there'll be more available this time. Yes, sir.
So in a big budget year, we spent $14 million for vouchers, but we have a teacher shortage in the state, except on the vacancies. Why are we doing that?
Why are we doing what?
Well, 14 million vouchers instead of doing the teacher shortage. We have 700 vacancies.
We're also, we're putting the step increase back in there as well. That's for every teacher in the state. We can't spend money we don't have. We can't spend money that we might not get. We're being cautious. We're holding some in the rainy day fund, but we've been careful. The legislature's been careful and cautious, watching the dollars, and we think we're doing the right thing this time. But there's no doubt that I have proposed 2 teacher pay raises in as many years. We want to have the finest teachers in the country. I had the raise that we had discussed that appeared to have received acceptance last year gone into effect. That would have taken us to the top 25 in the U.S., which is a place we've never been before. That's still our goal, and we'll get there. But we don't know how much money we're going to have this time, so we have to be very careful. Yes, ma'am.
So just to clarify, are you proposing that $3,000 increase for teachers this year?
No.
But if not, why?
No, we don't think we have the money. We are proposing the step increase that was postponed be activated. But now, if the money comes in, if things look good, then we can revisit it all, because we know, as everything we've said here, in one way or another, affects education and our economic growth for the future. And we are committed to that, and having the best teachers that we can find, that we can have in South Carolina, is a part of that.
As far as the rainy day fund, should the economy rebound with some state economists think it will do you have any proposals for how you'd like the legislature to maybe spend some of that rainy day money, or should it just stay in that fund?
That will depend on how rainy the days are. It will depend on how well things go, how sunny it is. But yes, we have a lot of needs, a lot of things that we could address with that money. The main thing is we don't need to waste any money. And any money that is spent needs to be 100% transparent, needs to be debated and discussed, and not sent to an agency that didn't ask for it and doesn't know what to do with it, and are awaiting a telephone call or instructions from some legislator or staff member. That's just not the way to do business. If we're careful with our money, then we'll be in good shape. And because we were careful, because we had as you know, when the pandemic hit, we had a $1.82 billion surplus that the office had projected, fiscal affairs, and it just about evaporated. We didn't know what was going to come in. So we continued with using the same budget that we'd had the year before. We just continued spending what we'd spent the prior fiscal year. Well, that turned out, and we did the same type thing back in 2008, 2009, and we weathered the storm very well. I think we're the only southeast state. We and Florida and North Carolina are the only southeastern states that are not having to go back in and cut their budgets. Georgia, I think, had to cut $1 billion out of their 4K budget. And we didn't take that approach. We're very careful with our money and smart with it, and that's the way we prosper.
As far as earmarks, you proposed this last year, and obviously the legislature, I know COVID affected some of the scheduling.
That's right.
The legislature didn't exactly wrap its arms around that suggestion. How do you feel like that, could that happen, you think, this year? Do you feel like there has been a willingness to work on that issue?
I think there is a willingness. I think the more the public understands the way that business is being done, then the more interest there'll be in changing that procedure. It's not a good procedure. It breeds distrust of the system and a lack of confidence in people working in this body.
Many teachers are still skeptical about going back into the classroom in person. It's nearly impossible for some of them to socially distance. And what do you say to those teachers, even though they're getting a little bit of money in the system? What do you say to those teachers who are scared?
Well, we've been telling the school districts and where we've had our conversations that whatever personal protective equipment they need, we'll provide. We have a stockpile of it now. We have an enormous amount of that material. CARES Act funding was put into buying the equipment and whatever was needed. A lot of our schools are in five-day face-to-face. The Christian, independent, and private schools, that's about 50,000 students. A lot of the charter public schools, those are all public schools, are doing it, and a number of the districts are doing it as well. I would just urge everyone, we know that the parents want their children to be in the classroom. That's where they learn. That's where all sorts of things happen in a child's development. If you take them out of that, those things don't happen, and there are unintended consequences, keeping the working parents away from their jobs and all of that. So what we have urged the districts to do is to focus on, don't let going to class be the default position. If the parents want the children to go, then find a way, be imaginative, look at best practices that the other districts have used, and find a way to get those children back in the classroom. That's where they need to be. We don't know what impact the failure of a lot of the children, particularly those who were at the bottom of their class to begin with, that were slow learners for one reason or another. We don't know what the impact is going to be on any of them, and particularly those that have been having trouble. And it's hard to catch up that much ground. That's why we have laws in this state and others about how many days of school you have to attend, because it's recognized that it is important for them to be in those schools, particularly at the younger ages. So I would say, to make a short answer, do everything possible to open that. If your school is not open, do everything possible. Think outside the box, as they say. See what the other schools have done, the other districts have done, and find a way to get those children back in the classroom with their teachers, where is the best place for them to be until they go home to their parents after school. Yes, sir.
Speaking of those younger ages, Governor, one of the strategies that folks have started to actually suggest is maybe we don't open all the schools, but for those younger children, the pre-K up through like second or third grade, have them actually the ones that can come back to school, because they're still very much developing. Is that something that you support at all?
Well, the experience in this state has shown you can do it at all ages, but especially in college years, and it's easier to use virtual education because you're dealing with older people who can follow instructions. But the schools in this state are doing it. We don't need a new model. We've got plenty of models right here on how to do it. We just need to find a way to do it. Yes, sir.
The $575 million from the DOE settlement, are there any recommendations you make for how that should be spent, or how big a role should the CSRNAs and folks around that area have?
I think they should. Well, of course, it's the people in the area are the ones who've been there with the Savannah River site. There's activity, as you know, in opening up the expanding the Savannah River National Laboratory. We have 4 schools, the University of South Carolina, Clemson, South Carolina State, Georgia, and Georgia Tech are going to be the academic core of that expansion. That's going to require some money. That is right there in that area. That is a great thing for investment in the future for South Carolina. But we have a lot of needs around the state. There are a lot of good things that we could put money into, but this is certainly one-time money, and we're delighted to have it. Wish we hadn't had to sue to get it. There's still a lot of questions about that facility there and Yucca Mountain and all the rest. But there needs to be a vigorous discussion about exactly what to do with that. But that's why we wanted to have it not in the budget, but separate from the budget, so it could be treated as a separate item. Yes, sir.
So I believe the budget lays out efforts to recruit new teachers. What do you think needs to be done to retain the teachers we already have?
Well, that's easy. We need to treat them well. We need to give them support. We need to give them good buildings, clean buildings. We need to pay them well. We need to have good textbooks. We need to have good materials for them, all of the above. And that is our intent to do that is expressed in this budget as well as others that we've discussed in the past. I think that everyone realizes how important this entire process is for our future. These are investments for the future, and they need to be done, and that's why we're emphasizing it in this budget. Are there any more questions? Yes, sir.
If it's okay, I'd like to talk to you about the riots that occurred at Capitol Hill. Some people are saying that President Trump may have incited some of that violence. What do you think about that, or what are your thoughts on the riots?
Well, I was watching, turned on the television like a lot of other people did. I could hardly believe what I was seeing. I mean, that was, there were regular protesters that were peaceful, but then you had some rioters. It reminded me a lot of some of these other peaceful protests that turned riotous by some in the crowd who were intent to do that. I was shocked, saddened, and very much concerned to see what I saw on television, those people breaking glass and going inside. And I agree with others who have said that those are criminal acts. And just as was done here in our state with Sheriff Lott and others that followed up and are bringing those to justice, that should be done there as well.
In 2018, ahead of your runoff, President Trump came and campaigned for you. I'm wondering, in light of this week, would you welcome him back for a campaign event ahead of your 2022?
I don't think he's going to be doing any campaigning for a while. I think he's going to take a much needed rest. But I will tell you, back in those days in 2018, as around the rest of the country, I've never seen such excitement about a candidate. And I would just urge everybody, in light of all the recent events and the things happen that we are not happy to see in our capital, but I would urge people concerning President Trump, as well as others, to remember the important things that they did. And don't let one day or a week or an event overwhelm the good things that were done by President Trump or other presidents that have gone before him.
I don't know if you've been able to see, they kind of just popped up, but on Twitter there's been these videos of Senator Lindsey Graham, I think they're being harassed, called a traitor for his speech on the Senate floor the other day. What is your response to people expressing that kind of language?
I don't know what's happened to people to have them express such vitriol or anger. I mean, every thought that crosses your mind does not need to be expressed. I think we need to take a step back and remember that we just follow the golden rule. Treat other people the way you want to be treated. Somehow, with the instant communication and big events, we have, I think, lost sight of things that have made this country so strong. But I'm confident that these days will pass. Every time there are clouds or shadows, remember there's a light that casts those shadows. And I've just, again, this is a great country. The capital is still there. I'm sure there'll be riots and things in the future. But if we follow the Constitution and we do what we know is right, we will continue to prosper. And if America does not prosper and remain strong, then the world has great problems. Yes, sir.
Can I go back to the vaccine for a second? So 50% of South Carolina's vaccine supply is still available. Why not make it available to all schools right now?
Well, we are working on that just about every minute of every day, receiving information and data. There's a survey being done now. There are some bottlenecks. There's some red tape that as soon as we can determine where it is, we've eliminated some. As you know, I put a deadline on the first group to either get your vaccination or have an appointment made before the 15th. That is, you may have an appointment for afterwards, but go on and do it. And then we're going to open it up to the next group. Well, the question is, what's the next group, and can we do it sooner than that? But I promise you, I'm in conversations with the hospital executives, with DHEC, with people around the state who are looking to get vaccinated, want to find out when and where. The National Guard is now moving they've been involved in this from the very beginning, as well as sending people to the riots in Charleston and Columbia, and being overseas and standing by for tornadoes. They've also been setting up vaccination sites around the state. Sometimes we have as many as 300 vaccination sites. I mean, the vaccinations are going apace. But there are federal laws involved in keeping track of the vaccine that have put some bottlenecks in it, but we're eliminating them as fast as we can. And right now, the group is hospital workers, and they're healthcare workers, and that's any healthcare worker in the state, regardless of age, condition, or anything else. And there are thousands of those. They are eligible. Now, a lot of people, we've been a little bit surprised. There are a lot of people who are not ready to get the vaccine. And that just opens the door for the next group sooner. So I can promise you that whatever I need to do with this executive power that is given to the governor to move those lines, to get that vaccine into people's arms as quickly as possible, we will do, and I expect that we'll be having some announcements soon.
Speaking of doing it as quickly as possible, are you considering maybe doing some drive-through vaccinations?
Yes.
Like some of our other
Yes, some of the hospitals are thinking about it, not thinking about it. They're planning for it right now.
Governor, you've talked about your willingness to wait your turn until you get vaccinated, but I'm wondering, in light of your COVID-19 diagnosis, have you been vaccinated, and have you shot up in line to get one?
No, I have not been vaccinated, and I'm not in the group. I'm not in one of those groups.
I'm wondering after your COVID diagnosis whether you shot up a priority, given you're also the governor of South Carolina.
No, well, so far as we know, if you've had it, you're immune for some period of time. So I figure I still am. I think the lieutenant governor is as well. But we'll wait our turn. But there are a lot of people. There are a lot of people that are older, or that have conditions, comorbidities they call them, bad conditions, whether it's diabetes, heart, cancer, all sorts of things. Those people are the ones that we need to see are protected. That's the way we started this with the testing. Remember, we were testing them first, and they need to be the ones that are vaccinated. We've started following the CDC recommendations and guidelines, as well as the law that impacts it, with the hospital workers, and then that was expanded quickly to first responders. But we're going to move into the next group just as soon as we can, and try to make it as simple as possible, so you don't have to study a chart to see.
So, speaking of those older adults who would like a vaccine, my inbox is filling
Well, those were the guidelines that were sent by the CDC, and all of the above with the best practices and how to do it were studied, examined by DHEC, and the path that was chosen was deemed to be the best because, as you recall, the idea was to vaccinate the hospital workers that take care of COVID patients or take care of people who may need to be in the hospital that are very ill that don't have the virus. That is, take care of the older people and the sicker people that end up in the hospital. We wanted to have those hospitals functioning to take care of the rest of us. That was the idea. But I'm with you. I think it's time, and we've had these conversations. It is time to have a more simplified, streamlined process to provide for the older people and those with serious conditions of any age to go ahead and get those viruses, but get the vaccinations. And the hospitals, we've been in contact, as have others, are working around the clock to find ways to accommodate more and more people, even to setting up drive-in clinics.
Governor, have you been in touch with the Biden administration in building bridges there? Since you were a proud Trump supporter, or have you been building bridges there and making sure South Carolina still gets the support it needs for health care and everything else going in the future? Have you talked to the new president?
No, I haven't talked to the president-elect since it's been a while. We were at a funeral together, Fritz Hollings' funeral, where he and I both spoke. And we sat with then the former Vice President and Mrs. Biden. And there are a lot of us that have been in politics off and on for a while that have gotten to know people on both sides or all sides of the aisle. And I expect that our state will do just fine. I'm not concerned. Because remember, we have a lot of talent in Washington in our congressional delegation. There are a lot of relationships that people here over the years have had. And of course, Congressman Clyburn is way up at the top of the hierarchy in the House. And we have other senators, have two senators that are well respected in Washington. Our whole delegation, I think, is highly respected. So South Carolina will do fine.
Thank you, guys.